Number 1. Kanghua Ren. In the world of YouTube, pranks have always been a way to chase clicks. Some are harmless, funny surprises, silly reactions. But sometimes the line between entertainment and cruelty gets crossed. And in 2017, a Spanish YouTuber named Kanghua Ren, better known online as Reset, crossed that line in a way that shocked the world and changed his career forever. Kanghua Ren wasn't just a small-time creator. By 2017, his channel had built up more than 1 million subscribers. His content thrived on outrageous challenges and pranks, the kind of stunts designed to grab attention in a crowded platform. But the prank he pulled in Barcelona that year would come to define him, not as a comedian, but as an example of what happens when shock value goes too far. The video in question showed Ren taking Oreo cookies and unscrewing them. Instead of the sweet white filling, he replaced it with toothpaste. He then approached a homeless man on the street, a man who was simply trying to survive, and handed him the altered cookies along with a €20 bill. Cameras rolled as Ren filmed the man's reaction, treating his suffering as part of the joke. To Ren's audience, the video seemed framed as another edgy prank. But to everyone outside the bubble of YouTube stunts, it was something else entirely. Exploitation of one of society's most vulnerable people for entertainment. The man reportedly vomited after eating the cookies, while Ren later tried to justify it, saying the homeless man would clean his teeth with toothpaste. That explanation rang hollow. What viewers saw was humiliation. The video sparked outrage, not just in Spain, but internationally. It raised questions about how far creators were willing to go for clicks, and whether platforms like YouTube had any responsibility for content that crossed into cruelty. Critics accused Ren of dehumanizing the homeless man, reducing his pain to a cheap stunt for online views. Authorities in Spain agreed. Prosecutors launched a case against him, charging him with violating the moral integrity of his victim. It was a rare moment where an online prank translated into real-world legal consequences. As the case moved forward, Ren attempted damage control. Reports indicated that he tried to offer the homeless man €300 to stay quiet and avoid legal proceedings. But this only deepened the controversy. It seemed less like an apology and more like hush money, an attempt to bury the problem rather than face accountability. By 2019, the case reached its conclusion in a Barcelona court. The judge didn't mince words. The ruling emphasized that Ren's actions weren't just thoughtless, they were degrading. The court declared him guilty of violating moral integrity. His sentence, 15 months in prison and a fine of €20,000 in compensation to the homeless man. Because of Spanish sentencing rules, first-time offenders often avoid actually serving prison time for sentences under 2 years, and Ren ultimately didn't spend time behind bars. But the conviction was still a major blow. It branded him not as an entertainer, but as a criminal who exploited someone's suffering. The ruling also included restrictions on his online activities. For 5 years, Ren was banned from uploading videos to YouTube, a punishment that struck at the very core of his career. For a content creator, losing access to your platform is like losing your voice. The fallout was swift. The incident became international news, a case study in the dangers of prank culture online. Commentators debated the ethics of YouTube fame, asking how algorithms and audience demand for ever more shocking content might push creators into crossing moral and legal lines. For the victim, the case meant recognition that his dignity mattered. The fine was intended not just as financial compensation, but as a statement. People living on the streets are not props for entertainment. They are human beings deserving of respect. Ren's story also sent a chilling message to other YouTubers. No longer was online content a lawless frontier where anything could be justified by clicks. Courts were watching, and consequences were real. Even after the ruling, questions lingered. Had Ren learned his lesson, or was he just another example of someone chasing internet fame without considering the human cost? For audiences, the case was a turning point. Many began to view prank videos with new suspicion, asking whether the laughs came at someone else's expense. Looking back, the case is remembered less as a prank gone wrong and more as a cautionary tale. In the rush for views, Kanghua Ren sacrificed empathy for shock value. He targeted a man who had nothing, stripping away his dignity for the sake of a video. And while he may have thought it was all just content, the courts reminded him, and the world, that morality doesn't stop when the camera starts rolling. The story of Reset forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How much responsibility do creators have for the people they involve in their content? Where is the line between humor and harm? And what does it say about us as viewers when we click, watch, and share videos that profit from someone else's suffering? In the end, Kanghua Ren's Oreo prank may have lasted only a few minutes on camera, but the consequences reshaped his life forever. It was a moment when the pursuit of digital fame collided with real-world accountability. And it serves as a stark reminder: when cruelty becomes entertainment, everyone loses. Number 2. DaddyOFive, The Martins. On YouTube, family channels usually promise warmth, laughter, and wholesome fun. Parents film trips to the park, birthday surprises, and everyday life with kids. But in 2017, one family's channel became infamous, not for heartwarming moments, but for pranks that were really something else entirely. For Mike and Heather Martin, better known as DaddyOFive, the camera became a weapon. And their rise and fall showed just how dark family content could become. The channel began like so many others. Mike Martin, a father living in Maryland, launched DaddyOFive as a peek into his daily life with his children. At first, it looked like another family vlog. Loud, a little chaotic, but relatable. But as the videos grew in popularity, so did the stunts. The Martins leaned into prank culture, a YouTube trend where creators played jokes on friends and family for entertainment. Only in this case, the targets weren't willing adults. They were the Martins' own children. Imagine tuning in and seeing a father and stepmother screaming accusations at a child over something he didn't do, only to reveal moments later it's just a prank. Or watching a child's toys destroyed in front of him while a camera captured his tears. These were the jokes that built DaddyOFive's following. The Martins presented the chaos as harmless fun. They laughed, they told their audience not to take it too seriously, and they insisted their kids were in on it. But viewers weren't convinced. The children's distress looked far too real. Their fear, their pleading, the way they flinched when the yelling started. Instead of comedy, many saw cruelty. By 2017, the controversy erupted. Critics across social media accused the Martins of exploiting their kids for clicks. Videos circulated of the children crying and begging their parents to stop. What might have been brushed off as edgy humor instead struck many as disturbing evidence of abuse, broadcast for the world to see. The turning point came when Philip DeFranco, a popular YouTube commentator, covered the story in depth. He highlighted moments where the children seemed genuinely terrified and raised the alarm that what was happening on DaddyOFive wasn't entertainment, it was mistreatment. His coverage brought massive attention, forcing mainstream outlets and, eventually, authorities to take notice. Soon, the channel that once prided itself on being a rowdy family show was under investigation. Child Protective Services became involved, and the public pressure grew impossible to ignore. Mike and Heather initially defended themselves, saying the kids were acting, that everyone was in on the joke, and that the outrage was overblown. But the evidence told a different story. In April 2017, the Martins deleted many of their videos and uploaded a formal apology. They sat before the camera, somber, acknowledging that they had gone too far. But by then, the damage was done. The authorities had stepped in, and the children's well-being had become the central concern. That same year, the Martins were charged and later convicted of child neglect. The sentence didn't involve prison time, but it did involve accountability. Both Mike and Heather received 5 years of probation. More significantly, custody arrangements were altered. Two of the children were removed from the household and placed with their biological mother. The court's decision was a public rebuke. It signaled that what happened on YouTube wasn't just entertainment. It had real-world consequences for the children at the center of it. The fallout for DaddyOFive was enormous. The channel, once boasting hundreds of thousands of subscribers, collapsed. Videos were taken down, sponsorships disappeared, and the Martins themselves became symbols of the dangers of turning family life into content. The story sparked broader debates about the ethics of family vlogging. If parents could so easily exploit their children for views, where should the line be drawn? Should platforms like YouTube impose stricter protections for minors appearing in videos? The DaddyOFive scandal made these questions unavoidable. For the children, the effects were personal and lasting. Imagine being old enough to look back at a digital archive of your childhood, except instead of memories of love and support, it's videos of your pain broadcast for strangers to comment on. The Martins case forced people to realize that children in family channels don't get the same protections as child actors on film sets. There are no regulations, no labor laws, no guarantees. Just the choices of parents chasing clicks. After their conviction, the Martins attempted to rebrand. They launched a new channel called LionMaker, though that too was eventually terminated by YouTube as the company cracked down. Their presence online never recovered. And in the years since, their story remains a cautionary tale. By 2020, conversations around sharenting, parents oversharing or exploiting their kids online, had grown louder, often citing DaddyOFive as a warning. The case became a reference point in discussions about internet culture, child safety, and the responsibilities of platforms to protect the vulnerable. Reflecting on it all, one truth stands out. The Martins may have seen their pranks as harmless, but the children's tears told another story. What they called entertainment was, to many viewers, exploitation in plain sight. And while the Martins avoided prison, they lost something bigger: the trust of their audience, their platform, and, most painfully, custody of two of their children. The DaddyOFive scandal shows us just how thin the line can be between content and cruelty. It forces us to ask, when cameras roll inside family homes, who is looking out for the children? And how many more stories like this will emerge before stricter protections are finally put in place? Number 3. Ruby Franke, the fall of 8 passengers. For years, Ruby Franke looked like the picture of wholesome motherhood. She was the smiling face behind 8 Passengers, a Utah-based family channel that drew in millions of viewers. With 6 children, a supportive husband, and a steady stream of family vlogs, Ruby built her brand on the idea of traditional values and picture-perfect parenting. But in 2023, the glossy image shattered. What had been presented as discipline and structure was revealed to be something far darker. And by 2024, Ruby Franke went from YouTube star to convicted felon. 8 Passengers began in 2015 during the boom of family vlogging. Ruby documented school mornings, family dinners, and parenting lessons. To her loyal audience, she seemed firm but loving, the type of mother who demanded respect while raising her children with strong principles. But even in the early days, some viewers noticed moments that felt unsettling. Times when Ruby's discipline seemed unusually harsh. When her son was denied lunch for forgetting his schoolwork, or when punishments felt more like humiliation than guidance, fans began to wonder if something wasn't right. Still, the channel grew. By the late 2010s, 8 Passengers had over 2 million subscribers. Ruby leaned into the role of tough love parent, often talking openly about rules, consequences, and her belief that children needed firm control. Critics accused her of crossing lines, but supporters defended her as simply a strict mom. For years, YouTube provided the perfect shield, What looked like discipline online could be brushed off as different parenting styles. But behind the camera, things were worse than anyone imagined. By 2022, Ruby had partnered closely with a woman named Jodi Hildebrandt, a counselor who ran a controversial life coaching organization. Jodi preached extreme methods of discipline, and Ruby's involvement with her only intensified suspicions. The more time Ruby spent with Jodi, the more isolated Ruby's children became from the outside world. The breaking point came in August 2023. In a quiet neighborhood in Ivins, Utah, a 12-year-old boy escaped from Ruby Franke's home. Malnourished, with visible injuries, he ran to a neighbor's house begging for food and water. The neighbor called 911, and the story that unfolded was horrifying. Police discovered another child in the house, also showing signs of neglect and abuse. The once polished image of a family vlogger was gone. In its place was a crime scene. Ruby was arrested that same day, along with Jodi Hildebrandt. Prosecutors accused them of subjecting the children to years of mistreatment, punishments that went far beyond discipline. The children were denied food, made to do extreme physical labor, and cut off from outside help. What had once been dismissed as strict parenting was now described in court as aggravated child abuse. As the news broke, the public reaction was stunned disbelief. Imagine following a family online for years, watching birthday celebrations, school milestones, Christmas mornings, only to learn that behind closed doors, those same children were suffering in silence. Viewers who once defended Ruby now turned against her, flooding social media with anger and sorrow. The legal process moved quickly. In December 2023, Ruby Franke pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. At her sentencing in early 2024, prosecutors laid out the full scope of what her children had endured. The judge didn't hold back, calling her actions deliberate and destructive. Ruby was sentenced to multiple consecutive prison terms, effectively ensuring she would spend many years behind bars. For the children, custody was transferred to other relatives, with the hope of giving them a safe environment to heal. The Franke family, once presented as a model of moral living, was now fractured by betrayal. The public fallout was enormous. National outlets covered every detail. True crime podcasts, talk shows, and YouTube commentators dissected how Ruby's behavior had gone unchecked for so long. Many pointed to YouTube itself, questioning why warning signs hadn't triggered action sooner. After all, the concerns had been visible in her videos for years. Clips where children were denied food, shamed, or punished in ways that made viewers uncomfortable. The scandal reignited debates about family vlogging. Should parents be allowed to monetize their children's lives? Who protects the kids when the cameras turn off? Unlike child actors, there are no labor laws or oversight for kids featured in YouTube channels. Ruby Franke's downfall became a rallying cry for reform, a reminder that behind the glossy thumbnails and cheerful intros, real children are often vulnerable. Even from prison, Ruby remains a polarizing figure. Some former fans express heartbreak, struggling to reconcile the smiling mother they once watched with the reality of her crimes. Others see her as proof of how image-driven social media can hide abuse in plain sight. Reflecting on Ruby Franke's story, one lesson is clear. Appearances can be deceiving. What millions saw as discipline was, in reality, cruelty. What was packaged as family values turned out to be control and harm. And in the end, it took the bravery of a child escaping in the night to reveal the truth. The case of 8 passengers forces us to confront unsettling questions. How many other families online may be hiding something similar? How many children are growing up with their pain turned into content? And at what point do we, as viewers, stop watching and start asking harder questions? For Ruby Franke, the brand she built is gone. The sentence has been handed down,
and the children she once filmed for the world are finally out of her grasp. But the shadow of her story lingers, an enduring reminder that sometimes the camera doesn't just capture family life. Sometimes it hides its darkest secrets.
Number 4. Matthew Cordle. He looked straight into the camera, his voice steady but heavy, and confessed to killing a man. Not in court, not in a police interview, but on YouTube for the entire world to see. It was one of the first times a social media video became the center of a true crime case, blurring the lines between confession, accountability, and the internet age. Before that shocking upload in 2013, Matthew Cordle wasn't known to millions. He was a 22-year-old from Ohio, a regular guy who posted casual vlogs online. He had friends, a family, and a future ahead of him. By all accounts, there was nothing to suggest he would one day become the subject of national headlines. But beneath the normal surface was something darker, a habit of drinking and a culture of partying that would eventually spiral out of control. The night everything changed was June 22nd, 2013. Like so many weekends before it, Matthew went out drinking with friends in Columbus, Ohio. Hours passed, the alcohol flowing more than it should have. And despite being warned not to drive, Matthew got behind the wheel of his Jeep. It was around 3 a.m. when his car swerved across lanes and collided head-on with another vehicle. Inside was 61-year-old Navy veteran Vincent Canzani, driving home from a night with friends. The crash was violent, and Vincent died at the scene. Imagine waking up the next morning, realizing not only that you caused a crash, but that an innocent man had lost his life because of your decision. For Matthew, that reality sank in quickly. Police investigated, and while Matthew wasn't immediately charged, he knew what was coming. Blood tests confirmed what he already admitted to himself. He had been far over the legal limit. But here's where the story takes a turn. Instead of waiting for the court system to formally process the case, Matthew reached out to a nonprofit organization called Because I Said I Would, known for encouraging people to make good on promises. With their help, he recorded a powerful video, a confession that didn't just admit his crime, but warned others about the dangers of drunk driving. On September 3rd, 2013, that video went live on YouTube. Millions of people clicked play. In it, Matthew didn't try to excuse himself. He looked directly at the camera and said, "I killed a man." He explained how he had made the choice to drive drunk, how Vincent had lost his life, and how he wanted to take full responsibility. It was raw, it was shocking, and it was unlike anything people had seen before. The video immediately went viral. News outlets across the US picked it up. Some praised him for owning up in such a public way, hoping his confession might save lives by deterring others from drinking and driving. Others were more skeptical. Was this genuine remorse or a carefully crafted attempt to sway public opinion before trial? For investigators, though, the video became part of the case. Within days, Matthew was formally indicted on charges of aggravated vehicular homicide and operating a vehicle under the influence. In court, his attorneys argued that his public confession was evidence of his willingness to take responsibility. The prosecution, on the other hand, pointed out that a viral video didn't change the fact that a man had lost his life.
The trial moved quickly. In September 2013, Matthew pleaded guilty. He admitted to everything: the drinking, the reckless decision to drive, the crash, and the irreversible consequence. Vincent Canzani's family attended the hearings, hearing once again what they already knew, that their loved one was gone because of someone else's choice. Sentencing came in October 2013. The judge handed down 6.5 years in prison, the maximum allowed under Ohio law for his charges. To some, it felt lenient. 6 years for a man's life didn't seem enough. To others, it was the system working as written, with punishment balanced against his early acceptance of guilt. Matthew began serving his sentence immediately. Behind bars, he continued to speak about the dangers of drunk driving, writing letters, and giving statements through advocates. But prison was still prison. There was no escaping the reality that his actions had destroyed not only Vincent's life, but also his own future. As of now, Matthew Cordle has completed his sentence and been released. He is no longer in the headlines, and whether his time in prison truly changed him is something only he can know. What remains, though, is the haunting memory of that video. One that put accountability, grief, and public perception all on display in front of millions of strangers. The case left a lasting impact. It forced people to confront the role of social media in justice. Should a viral confession carry weight in court? Should it be praised as honesty or critiqued as self-serving? And perhaps most importantly, did it actually prevent others from making the same mistake, or was it just another fleeting internet moment? For Vincent Canzani's family, those questions may never matter. What mattered was that a husband, a father, and a friend was gone forever. And in the end, that's what lingers. One young man turned on a camera and told the truth, but the truth didn't erase the damage already done. It didn't bring Vincent back. It didn't undo that night. It only left a warning. Sometimes the most ordinary decision, like grabbing your keys after a night of drinking, can alter dozens of lives in an instant. And no amount of confession, no matter how viral, can change the final outcome.
Number 5. LionMaker Studios. He called himself LionMaker, a cheerful Minecraft YouTuber who built blocky castles, role-played with fans, and presented himself as the friendly host of a virtual world. But behind the colorful pixels was a far more sinister story, one that would shatter the trust of parents and children, and end in a criminal conviction that destroyed his career forever. Before everything unraveled, Marcus Kosick, better known online as LionMaker, was a Belgian-born creator who found early success on YouTube. During the rise of Minecraft in the early 2010s, he built a following of hundreds of thousands of subscribers. His videos weren't about edgy humor or controversy. They were marketed as family-friendly. His lion-themed character became recognizable across Minecraft servers, and he often invited young fans to join him in collaborative videos. For many children, it felt like a dream come true, to play alongside their favorite YouTuber. But this open-door approach was also the first red flag. While most creators kept distance between themselves and underage fans, LionMaker blurred those boundaries, making himself constantly available through private chats and gaming sessions. At first, parents saw it as harmless fun, but over time, troubling stories began to emerge. In 2015, rumors circulated online that LionMaker was sending inappropriate messages and images to underage fans. Screenshots appeared, and other YouTubers began calling attention to his behavior. At first, Marcus denied everything. He claimed he was being set up, that enemies were trying to destroy his channel. But the evidence kept piling up, and unlike simple internet drama, these accusations pointed to crimes. Imagine being a parent, hearing your child talk excitedly about playing Minecraft with their hero, only to discover that same person was trying to manipulate them behind the scenes. That was the nightmare many families faced as the allegations grew louder. By late 2015, things had escalated beyond the point of speculation. Law enforcement in Switzerland, where Marcus was living at the time, began investigating. The digital trail was clear. He had been contacting underage fans, grooming them, and exploiting their trust. What had once looked like harmless collaboration in a video game world was exposed as calculated manipulation. In 2016, Swiss courts brought charges against him. The trial was a shock for the online community. Many of his viewers were too young to fully understand, but for parents and fellow creators, it confirmed the worst fears. The accusations weren't rumors, they were real. Marcus Kosick was convicted of child sexual abuse and exploitation offenses. For the prosecution, the evidence was straightforward. messages, images, and testimony from victims. The defense offered little room for doubt. Unlike many creators who continue to deny wrongdoing for years, Marcus faced the court and the consequences head-on, though not by choice, but because the digital proof left him no escape. The conviction sent him to prison in Switzerland, marking the end of his YouTube career. His channel, once thriving with millions of views, was effectively dead. Brands distanced themselves, fellow creators cut ties, and YouTube itself began tightening policies on how creators interacted with young fans, spurred in part by this very case. But beyond the courtroom, the public fallout was enormous. The gaming community, especially within Minecraft, felt betrayed. A space that was supposed to be about creativity and play had been corrupted. Parents became more cautious, warning their kids about engaging with YouTubers online. And fellow creators began to speak openly about the responsibility of influencers, especially when their audience is overwhelmingly young. As for Marcus, his time in prison was relatively short compared to the damage he caused. After serving his sentence, he faded into obscurity, unable to return to YouTube or rebuild his brand. Unlike some creators who manage comebacks after scandals, this was one case where redemption was impossible. His name remains synonymous with betrayal, and his channel is remembered not for the joy it brought, but for the harm behind it. Looking back, the case of LionMaker Studios stands as one of the earliest examples of how social media fame could be weaponized. It forced platforms like YouTube to reckon with the uncomfortable truth that predators could use family-friendly branding as a disguise. It also raised bigger questions. How do we protect children in digital spaces that seem safe but are open to anyone? Who should be responsible? The parents, the platforms, or the creators themselves? For Marcus Kosick, the answer came in the form of handcuffs and a prison sentence. For his victims, the impact stretched far beyond those courtroom walls. Trust had been shattered, and healing would take far longer than any prison term. And for the world watching, it was a chilling reminder. Sometimes the monsters don't lurk in shadows. Sometimes they wear cartoon lion skins in a pixelated game, smiling for the camera while hiding something far more dangerous. Number 6. Austin Jones. He sounded like the safe choice. A clean voice, a clean image, and a channel parents didn't mind their kids watching. Austin Jones seemed like the kind of online singer you could trust, but when the smiling clips faded and the browser tabs closed, a different story waited to be found. He was born in Illinois in 1992 and started uploading in the late 2000s, right as YouTube was becoming a launchpad for unknown talent. No instruments, just layered harmonies and upbeat covers. He toured small venues, appeared at fan events, and took photos with the same teens who learned his songs by heart. Imagine being one of those fans, hearing your favorite lines and thinking the person behind them must be exactly as kind as he seemed. Then the tone shifted. Around 2015, whispers surfaced online. Private messages to underage fans, lines that sounded wrong even when read in the best light. He addressed some of it and apologized, and for a while, the storm felt like it might pass. But why did the discomfort linger? Why did some fans say the messages kept coming? Investigators would later show how access and influence can be misused. The private chats weren't harmless. They were part of a pattern, hidden behind a friendly public face. Imagine being a teenager, getting a message from a creator you admire, and feeling the weight of that attention. It feels special. It also makes it harder to say no. By 2017, federal authorities opened a case. The public still saw a singer chasing harmony. Agents were quietly collecting digital evidence. Interviews, messages, timelines. Piece by piece, the distance between the public image and the private behavior closed. If the songs were the hook, the messages were the reveal. And the reveal was stark. In June 2017, agents arrested him at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The charge was receipt of illegal material involving minors. The fan world shook. Parents who once approved of the channel were now reading court filings. Creators who had shared stages with him were distancing themselves overnight. Imagine scrolling your feed and seeing the news, trying to square the voice you knew with the case you were reading. What followed was the long, careful process of the courts. Prosecutors laid out how he used his platform to reach minors, how he framed private requests as part of fan interactions, and how he pressured them. The defense offered context, but the pattern stood. Each new filing added weight, each interview added detail. The public conversation turned from music to accountability. He entered a guilty plea in early 2019 to one federal count related to receiving illegal material involving minors. That phrasing sounds clinical. It isn't. Behind it are real people who thought they were helping someone they admired, only to learn they were stepping into a case file. Imagine being one of those fans and realizing strangers will now read your story in a courtroom record. Sentencing came in May 2019, 10 years in federal prison, followed by a term of supervised release. The number was clear enough for headlines, but it also marked a shift for the platforms that had helped build his name. YouTube removed his channel. Event organizers scrubbed lineups. Industry contacts closed their doors. The soundtrack of his career went quiet, replaced by legal timelines and custody status updates. The fallout brought hard questions that still matter. How do platforms protect young fans when creators can message them directly? How do parents set boundaries around fandom without turning every favorite creator into a warning sign? And what steps should seem routine now? Age checks, reporting tools, transparent policies that didn't feel as urgent before. For many, the most painful part is the betrayal of trust. Fans thought they were part of something positive. Parents thought the content was safe. The gap between the on-screen persona and the off-screen behavior was the story all along. Imagine the moment the mask feels like it slips. The same room, the same laptop light, but a different understanding of the person you've been watching. Today, Austin Jones is serving his federal sentence. When he is eventually released, he will be under supervision with strict limits on what he can do and where he can be. There won't be tours, green rooms, or convention halls filled with cheers. There will be monitoring and rules, and a name tied not to melodies, but to a case that changed how some people look at creator-fan relationships. Number 7. Stas Reeflay. The camera was rolling, the chat was active, and thousands of viewers were watching live. But what they didn't realize was that a stunt meant to shock and entertain would soon turn into a tragedy, one that could never be undone. Stas Reeflay, whose real name is Stanislav Reshetnikov, was a Russian live streamer who thrived on pushing boundaries. Born in 1995, he was part of a growing trend in Russia where streamers performed outrageous, often dangerous acts in exchange for donations. The more shocking the content, the more money poured in. His streams weren't about music, gaming, or comedy. They were about shock value, pranks, and sometimes cruelty. And his audience encouraged it. To his followers, Reeflay was bold, edgy, and unfiltered. He cultivated a persona of someone who didn't care about rules, someone willing to go further than anyone else to keep viewers glued to the screen. But behind the theatrics, he was also a young man who seemed consumed by his need for attention and validation. Every donation became an incentive to push the line further, no matter the cost. By late 2020, his streams had already gained notoriety. He filmed arguments, dangerous stunts, and disturbing pranks. Yet people kept tuning in. The model was simple. Fans would send him money, and in return, he would fulfill dares or push the chaos further. What no one expected was just how far it would go. On December 2nd, 2020, Reeflay began yet another stream from his home near Moscow. His girlfriend, Valentina Grigorieva, was with him. Throughout the broadcast, the chat egged him on, sending donations with instructions. At some point, viewers encouraged him to take things further. And that's when the situation spiraled out of control. Valentina was forced outside in near-freezing temperatures, wearing little to protect her from the cold. As the stream continued, she remained outside longer and longer. Imagine the scene. A young woman shivering in the darkness, temperatures dropping, while thousands of strangers watched online, some laughing, some horrified, and others still sending money. It wasn't a scripted prank, it was real life playing out in front of an audience. Eventually, when Reeflay brought Valentina back inside, she was unresponsive. Instead of stopping the stream immediately, the broadcast continued. The chilling reality set in not only for him, but for the viewers. They had just witnessed the consequences of a deadly stunt. Emergency services were called, but it was too late. Valentina had died of hypothermia. News of the event spread quickly, first across Russian media, then around the world. Headlines described it as a tragedy live-streamed for profit. Viewers who had tuned in out of curiosity or entertainment suddenly realized they had watched a young woman's final moments unfold in real time. The investigation moved swiftly. Authorities arrested Reeflay, charging him with negligent homicide. Prosecutors argued that his reckless behavior, fueled by online donations and his desire for attention, directly caused Valentina's death. Defense arguments pointed to the unpredictable nature of live streams, but the evidence was undeniable. She had been left exposed to freezing temperatures, all under his control. In 2021, Stas Reeflay was convicted of negligent homicide. The court sentenced him to 6 years in prison. For many, the punishment seemed light compared to the weight of the loss. But under Russian law, negligent homicide carried limited maximum terms. Still, it was a rare case of an online personality facing direct legal consequences for actions taken during a broadcast. The public fallout was enormous. Russian officials spoke out about the dangers of unregulated streaming, calling for tighter controls on what could be broadcast. Internationally, the case fueled conversations about how far people would go for views, likes, and donations. Could platforms ever fully prevent tragedies like this? Or had the pursuit of online fame created a new kind of danger where boundaries were tested in real time with devastating consequences? Viewers who once sent him money now faced their own reckoning. Many asked themselves, had they been complicit? After all, the donations and dares were part of the chain of events that night. Some admitted to feeling horrified by their own role in encouraging behavior that turned deadly. Reeflay's name became a cautionary tale. Instead of fame, he was left with infamy. His career as a streamer was over, his freedom taken away, and his reputation permanently destroyed. The internet, which had once cheered him on, now condemned him. Reflecting on this case, one question lingers. Where is the line between entertainment and exploitation? Stas Reeflay's story isn't just about one reckless streamer. It's about a culture that rewards shock value and a system where tragedy can become content. Valentina Grigorieva's death was senseless, and while the man responsible sits in prison, the deeper lesson is about what we choose to watch, encourage, and reward online. Because at the heart of it, one truth remains. The chase for views ended with a young woman's life cut short, and a reminder that not everything we see on screen can be switched off once the broadcast ends. Number 8. Onision, Gregory Jackson. He called himself Onision, the edgy, outrageous YouTuber who seemed to thrive on drama. But behind the millions of views and the shock value content, his name became synonymous with scandal, accusations, and a career that crumbled under the weight of controversy. And here's the crucial thing. Gregory Jackson, better known as Onision, was never convicted in court, yet his reputation and career were destroyed by years of public allegations, investigations, and a massive backlash that made him one of the most hated creators in YouTube history. Gregory Jackson started out in the late 2000s as a small-time YouTuber experimenting with skits and comedy. His breakout moment came in 2009 with a bizarre video called Banana Song, I'm a Banana, where he danced in a banana costume while screaming the lyrics. It was strange, absurd, and it went viral. The video racked up millions of views, pushing him into YouTube's spotlight. From there, Onision built his brand around being brutally honest and unfiltered. He uploaded comedy sketches, satirical rants, and edgy commentary, the kind of content that either made you laugh or made you furious. And for years, that formula worked, but the drama wasn't just on screen. Off camera, rumors and accusations about his personal life began to swirl. Viewers noticed he blurred the line between his content and his relationships. His YouTube persona was intense, confrontational, and often cruel. That carried over into his private interactions, and soon, stories from young women who claimed they had been mistreated began to surface. By the mid-2000s, the tone around Onision had shifted. Former fans and partners accused him of manipulative behavior and inappropriate conduct, especially toward women who were very young at the time. Online forums lit up with testimonies, screenshots, and timelines. Many allege that he used his platform and influence to build unhealthy, exploitative relationships. For the public, these accusations painted a disturbing picture, and the outrage only grew louder. Imagine being one of his millions of subscribers back then. One day you're laughing at his skits, and the next you're reading allegations that make you question everything you thought you knew about him. That tension between his quirky videos and the serious accusations behind the scenes became a constant storm around his name. In 2019, things escalated. Several of the women who had come forward gained mainstream attention. News outlets covered their stories. YouTube commentary channels dissected his past, and eventually, the FBI became involved. Agents reportedly looked into claims that involved underage fans. While no criminal charges were ever filed against him, the fact that federal authorities were investigating cemented the seriousness of the allegations in the public's mind. At the same time, his YouTube career was unraveling. Advertisers pulled away. Viewers abandoned him in droves. Major documentaries, including a series by Chris Hansen, brought the accusations into living rooms across America. Each new story layered onto the last, creating a narrative that Onision was far more than just a controversial entertainer. He was someone the internet believed had crossed unforgivable lines. Legally, though, the picture was different. Onision was never convicted of any crime. Despite lawsuits, police visits, and federal interest, no charges ever stuck. And that's important to remember. In the eyes of the law, he is not guilty of any of the criminal accusations that were investigated. But in the court of public opinion, the verdict was already decided. By 2021, YouTube took its most decisive step. The platform permanently demonetized his channels, stripping him of ad revenue, and essentially cutting off his ability to profit from his audience. For a creator who once made his entire living from the site, it was a career-ending blow. The public fallout was enormous. To some, this was justice, not through a courtroom, but through collective action. For others, it was a sobering example of what happens when someone lives on the internet's edge for too long. Onision became a cautionary tale. The YouTuber who went from viral fame to complete disgrace. Today, Gregory Jackson lives largely out of the public eye. He still uploads content on smaller platforms, but his reach is nothing like it was at his peak. His name remains tied to those allegations, to the investigations, and to the countless videos analyzing his downfall. Even without a criminal conviction, his reputation never recovered. And that brings us back to the central question. What does it take to end a career? In Onision's case, it wasn't a guilty verdict or a prison sentence. It was the steady drip of accusations, the relentless spotlight of the internet, and the overwhelming backlash of a community that decided it had seen enough. Onision's story forces us to reflect on the power of platforms, the vulnerability of young fans, and the role of public opinion in shaping justice. He was never convicted in a courtroom, but in the eyes of millions, his punishment came in another form: the loss of his career, his credibility, and the audience that once made him famous. Number 9. Ricardo López, the Björk Stalker. Before there were YouTubers, before vlogging became a daily ritual, one man unknowingly created one of the darkest video diaries in history. This is Ricardo López, known infamously as the Björk Stalker. And here's an important disclaimer: his recordings predated YouTube, but after his death, they spread online, where he became infamous as an early example of an evil vlogger. Ricardo López was born in Uruguay in 1975 and moved to the United States as a child. He grew up in Georgia, where he lived a quiet, isolated life. By all outward appearances, he was ordinary. He worked as an exterminator, lived in a small apartment, and kept to himself. But inside, Ricardo struggled with depression, loneliness, and a gnawing sense of inadequacy. He felt invisible, and like many who feel powerless in their own lives, he searched for meaning in obsession. That obsession became the Icelandic singer Björk. In the mid-1990s, Björk was an international star, blending experimental pop with a unique, otherworldly image. For millions, she was a beloved artist. For Ricardo López, she became an obsession so consuming that it would ultimately define and end his life. In 1996, López began recording what would become more than 20 hours of video diaries. He set up a camera in his dim apartment and began talking. To himself, to the lens, to an imagined audience. What he captured was disturbing, a slow unraveling of a man convinced that his feelings for Björk meant something profound. He documented his fantasies, his anger, and eventually his plan to act. Imagine pressing play on one of those tapes. At first, it might seem like any young man venting to a camera, rambling about frustrations and dreams. But as the hours pass, the tone shifts. He rails against society, against himself, and finally against Björk herself when news broke that she was dating another musician. To López, this felt like a personal betrayal. His obsession twisted into rage. By the summer of 1996, his recordings had transformed into something far darker. He began constructing a homemade bomb. He designed a device that would spray sulfuric acid when opened, disguising it in a book package. On camera, he showed pieces of the device and explained his plans. His goal was to send it directly to Björk's home in London. On September 12, 1996, López mailed the package. He then returned home, set up his camera for one final tape, and prepared his ending. In that last recording, he shaved his head, painted his face, and sat in front of the lens as he explained his feelings one last time. He then ended his own life on camera. He was 21 years old, but the story didn't end there. The next day, police discovered his body after neighbors reported a foul odor coming from his apartment. Inside, they found the video diaries, along with detailed notes about the package he had mailed. Immediately, law enforcement in the US contacted authorities in the UK Scotland Yard, intercepted the package before it could ever reach Björk. The bomb was safely defused, preventing what could have been a devastating tragedy. The investigation shocked the world. News outlets reported not only on the attempted attack, but also on the bizarre discovery of the tapes. Here was a man who had, step by step, recorded his descent into obsession and violence. Hours of footage that looked eerily similar to the vlogs that would dominate YouTube a decade later. Björk, understandably shaken, released a statement expressing sympathy for López and his family, while also expressing relief that no one had been harmed.
She took a step back from the public eye for a time, grappling with the chilling reality that she had been the target of such a dangerous fixation. Legally, there was no trial, no sentencing. Lopez's death closed the case. But in the years that followed, his tapes leaked online. First in underground circles, then more widely as the internet grew. By the 2000s and 2010s, clips of his recordings appeared on YouTube and forums, often labeled as the Diary of the Björk Stalker. In this way, Ricardo López became infamous not in his own lifetime, but in the digital age that followed. The public fallout was intense. Some viewers were horrified, others morbidly fascinated. His recordings are now studied as examples of obsession, parasocial fixation, and the dangers of unfiltered access to celebrity lives. Psychologists and criminologists point to his tapes as an unsettling precursor to the darker side of internet culture. Reflecting on his case leaves a haunting question. If López had lived in the age of social media, would he have been just another face on YouTube, ranting into the void? Or would the same patterns have played out in front of millions, rather than in a small Georgia apartment? Ricardo López never lived to see YouTube, never went viral in his own time. But his story lingers as an early warning of what happens when obsession festers unchecked, and how technology can turn one man's private dissent into a spectacle for the world to see. Number 10. Trey Eric Sesler, Mr. Anime. He called himself Mr. Anime, a cheerful young YouTuber known for quirky reviews and lighthearted skits. But behind the screen name was Trey Eric Sesler, a man whose secret darkness would shatter his family and horrify the online community that once adored him. Trey Sesler was born in 1989 in Houston, Texas, and grew up in what seemed like an ordinary, supportive household. He had two loving parents, Lawton and Rhonda, and an older brother, Mark. Trey loved anime, movies, and video games, and in the late 2000s, he found an outlet for those passions online. On YouTube, under the name Mr. Anime, he uploaded reviews, sketches, and commentary about his favorite shows. His channel drew thousands of subscribers, and to many, he seemed like a friendly, funny, even slightly awkward fan who had carved out a space for himself on the internet. But hidden in the background of some of his videos were unsettling hints. Trey sometimes joked about violence, using fake guns or referencing dark themes in ways that, in hindsight, seemed more like warnings than jokes. In one clip, he mentioned taking a break from YouTube because he needed to do some things that would make him more powerful. At the time, most fans brushed it off as strange humor. But for Trey, those words reflected a disturbing reality. He was slipping further into violent fantasies. By 2012, Trey had grown more isolated. Friends noticed he became withdrawn and obsessed with ideas of mass shootings. He researched attacks online, stockpiled weapons, and scribbled disturbing notes in journals. He later admitted he fantasized about carrying out a mass attack, possibly at his former school. But before he could attempt that, he turned his focus closer to home. On March 20th, 2012, in the quiet town of Waller, Texas, Trey made a choice that would shock the world. Armed with a .22 caliber rifle, he went through his family home and shot his parents and older brother. All three died inside the house they had shared. Neighbors later recalled hearing nothing unusual that day, only to see police swarm the street hours later. Imagine being one of the first officers on the scene. The home was in disarray, with evidence of violence in every room. Trey had scrawled cryptic messages on the walls, including, "I love my mom, dad, and brother." It was clear this wasn't an impulsive act. It was part of a plan he had been forming for some time. When police found Trey later that day, he confessed almost immediately. He admitted not only to killing his family, but also to preparing for something far worse, a mass shooting.
His journals detailed his plans, including the type of weapons he wanted and the settings he had considered. To investigators, it was chilling to realize how close he had come to carrying it out. The legal process moved swiftly. Trey was charged with capital murder, and although Texas is a death penalty state, prosecutors accepted a plea deal that spared him execution. In 2013, Trey Sesler was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was only 22 years old at the time of his sentencing, and barring extraordinary circumstances, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. The fallout from the case spread far beyond Texas. On YouTube, the news hit especially hard. Fans of Mr. Anime struggled to reconcile the upbeat young man they thought they knew with the killer described in headlines. Some of his old videos were replayed in a new light, with every odd joke or strange comment now viewed as a red flag. In the broader community, Trey's case fueled debates about warning signs, internet culture, and how violent fantasies can fester unnoticed until it's too late. His story became a disturbing reminder that online personas can mask private turmoil, and sometimes something far more dangerous. Reflecting on Trey Sesler's downfall leaves a sobering thought. He had talent, a platform, and a supportive family. He could have continued building his channel, shaping a career in entertainment or media. Instead, he chose a path of destruction that ended 3 lives and erased any future he might have had. Today, behind the walls of a Texas prison, Trey Eric Sesler is no longer Mr. Anime. He's an inmate serving a sentence that will never end. And it leaves us with one haunting question. What turned a smiling face on YouTube into a symbol of wasted potential and unthinkable betrayal?